All right, Algebra 1A students, welcome to part 2 of lesson 1.1. Today we are basically going to do the opposite of what it was we did yesterday. Yesterday we were writing algebraic expressions from a string of word phrases. So we were looking at words, remember, like more than, or sum, or quotient, or product, right? And we were writing math symbols and expressions with numbers and letters from those word phrases. Today we're going to actually do the opposite of that. We're going to take an algebraic expression and try to write it out with those words that mean these different math symbols, these different math operations. Okay, so we'll start by looking at some words that we can use for each of our math operations. Okay, starting with the plus sign. Possible words that we can use there, which I would like you to write down in your notes, please, would be like the sum, right? The word sum means plus. So sum of two things means to add those two things together. That's one way we can write out in words that plus sign. We can also say more than, like 10 more than x. That'd be x plus 10 more. So, right? 10 more than means add. We could also say added to. You could say 10 added to some number x, where you'd say x plus 10. 10 got added to some number x. Okay, so those are three options for us to use with the plus symbol. Now, if we move to the minus symbol, it looks very similar, but our words are slightly different because instead of sum, which means plus, we use difference of, which means minus. So the difference of n and 5. Difference of n and 5 would be n minus 5. Okay, so when we see a minus sign, we can write difference of the two quantities that we see there. Okay. We can also say less than. Less than. Remember, we can say like 6 less than n means we start with n and then take 6 away. If you want to, you can just use less. You don't have to use the than piece. And remember, if we say 5 less x, that just means 5 minus x. Do it in that order. So hopefully you remember that from yesterday, the difference between less and less than. Okay, but either way, we can use less or less than to say minus in some certain order, or we can just say minus. 6 minus x is a perfectly fine way to write out in words what we see in symbols, 6 minus sign x. So you can use just the word minus, M-I-N-U-S, for a minus sign as well. I'm perfectly okay with that. Okay. Now when we get to multiplying and dividing, I'm going to add one more to multiplying here. Right. So we have a few options for multiplying. We could say multiplied by. We could say some number x multiplied by 5. That would say x, times 5. So multiplied by is one option. We can also say times. We can just write out the word times. 6 times x, or x times 5, or something like that. Or we can say the product of two things. We can say the product of 12 and n. The product of 12 and n. The word product, of course, means to multiply. To multiply. And just as a reminder, a couple different ways we can see multiplying. One way is just with a very large dot, right? So the dot just means multiply. Or we could just see something like 6n, right? We don't even need a symbol between it if it's just a letter and a number. So 3 options for you to use when we're talking about multiplication, which we will most often see like this with just a number and a letter, or with our dot, not usually with our x. We can say multiplied by, times, or the product of. All right, and then when we get to dividing, we've got a couple options here. Just a couple options for dividing, really, and the most important word for us when we divide is this word quotient. Okay, quotient of x and 5, quotient of n and 2. And remember that the order matters when we do quotient as well. So the first thing goes first, second thing goes second. Okay. If you don't want to use the word quotient, that's okay. You can just say divided by for this symbol. You can say 12 divided by n. Right? That would come from 12 divided by n. Okay, so you can use divided by as your division symbol. Write it out like this as well. Perfectly okay with that too. All right. So a few options here for you to use when you're writing out your word sentences. So let's look at just a couple examples, and then we'll be all set to work on our practice problem set tomorrow. Now, this first expression that they give us right here, remember that this just says 3x, but 3x indicates multiplying. Okay, that's what it says here. Indicates a product, indicates multiplying. So this is really 3 times x. So a couple options for us would be either to say 3 times some number x, or the product of 3 and some number x. Okay, so times or product are our two options. When we're using a variable, because the variable can mean any number, we want to say it can mean any number. So we say a number x. Okay, so variables can be any number. So we say a number x, or a number n, or a number q, or whatever that letter is. Okay. So because variables can be whatever number they want, we do indicate that when we write it out. Okay, by saying a number. So let's look at a couple examples here in Got It number 4 right on this page. I've got 4 problems here. I'm going to do letter B with you, and then I'm going to have you do the other ones, okay? Now, letter B looks to me like it's doing 2 things. One thing is it's adding 9. It's adding 9. And then the other thing is it is timesing x by 10. Okay, it's doing 10 times x and then adding 9. So one thing I know for sure is I'm going to say sum of, because remember sum means the plus sign. Okay, so sum of, and let's see, what is the first thing I have in my sum? Well, it's this 10x piece. Now 10x in itself implies that we're doing, remember from up here, right, we're doing a product. We're doing a product when we see a number and a variable next to each other. So the first part of my sum, this 10x, is actually the product of 10 and a number x. Right? That's the first part of my product, and then the second part of, or excuse me, that's the first part of my sum, and the second part of my sum is the number 9. Okay, so here is how I would write that out in words. Okay, it's a little bit more complicated because this is one that's doing 2 at the same time. But here's what's happening. We have the sum of, and then here's our first piece, the product of 10 and a number x, that's 10x, and 9. Okay, the product of 10 and a number x is here, 9 is here, and the word sum in the front tells me that I'm adding these 2 things together. Okay, and that's the plus sign right there. Okay, so plus sign means sum of. The first part is the whole multiplying thing, 10 and x, and then the second part is a 9. So what I'd like you to do is look at here letter A. Look at letter A. Look at letter C. And look at letter D. Okay, so do these 3 right now. Make sure you write down this example, this answer here, because I'm going to take this away to give you some room, give myself some room to work on these when we're done. So get this written down for letter B. 10x plus 9 is sum of the product of 10 and a number x and 9. And then work on A, C, and D. Then when you're finished with those 3, come on back and I'll show you what we should get. Okay, so in the front, really all I have in this first one is just 2 things added together. So I'm going to say 8.1 added to a number x. Okay, because I have 8.1 and it's added on to a number x. Or I could also say 8.1 more than a number x, or I could say the sum of 8.1 and a number x. So 3 options there for our addition in letter A. Now letter C, we have n and 3 with a fraction bar, which hopefully we understand now means dividing. So I could say a number n divided by 3. Or I could also say the quotient of n and 3. The quotient of a number n and 3. So 2 options for my dividing sign right there in letter C. A number n divided by 3, because remember the fraction bar is division, or the quotient of a number n and 3. Now in letter D, I'm doing 2 things again. And the minus sign here in the middle tells me that it's going to have something to do with the difference of, and then the first thing in my difference is 5 times x, which again is a whole product. The product of 5 and a number x, and then I'll put a comma to kind of separate the 2, and the second thing in my difference is 1 and 1. Okay? So the difference of the product of 5 and a number x and 1. So that one gets connected up to here. Okay, the other way that I could write that is just using a minus symbol. I could just say the product of 5 and a number x minus 1. Okay, I could just use the word minus. Also totally fine. So 2 options there as well. Okay. Hopefully you got those 3 correct. If you did not or have questions, please make a note to ask me in class tomorrow. Otherwise, that's all I have for you tonight. Have a wonderful night.